I wasn't supposed to hear it. Just one sentence, sharp as glass, that shattered everything I thought I knew about my son's bride minutes before the wedding. I learned the truth, and I knew I couldn't stay silent. Standing in that church hallway, my heart pounding against my ribs, I realized that the next hour would either save my son's life or destroy our relationship forever. But a mother does what she must, even when it means becoming the villain in her own child's story. My name is Helen Whitmore, and at 68 years old, I thought I'd seen enough of life's cruelties to recognize when someone was about to hurt my family. But nothing could have prepared me for what I overheard on what should have been the happiest day of my son's life. The morning of Michael's wedding dawned crisp and clear in Ashford, Vermont. Our little town had dressed itself in autumn's finest colors, as if nature itself was celebrating. I'd been up since 4:30 a.m., unable to sleep, my mind racing through the checklist of final preparations. The mother of the groom doesn't have many official duties, but I'd insisted on helping wherever I could. Perhaps it was my way of holding on to my son just a little longer before he officially belonged to someone else. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. at St. E. Margaret's, the same church where I'd married Michael's father 42 years ago. I arrived early, carrying the antique cufflinks that had belonged to my late husband, something old for Michael to wear. The church was already buzzing with activity. Florists were putting final touches on arrangements of white roses and baby's breath, while the wedding coordinator barked orders into her headset. I made my way to the small room where Michael was getting ready with his groomsmen. My breath caught when I saw him in his charcoal gray suit, adjusting his tie in the mirror. For a moment, I saw not the successful 35-year-old architect he'd become, but the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. "Mom, you're early," he said, turning to embrace me. His smile was radiant, his hazel eyes so like his father's, sparkling with joy. "I wanted to give you these before things got too hectic," I said, presenting the cufflinks. "Your father wore them when we got married." Michael's expression softened as he took them. "Thanks, Mom. Dad would have loved Sabrina." I forced myself to smile, though something twisted in my stomach at the mention of his bride. Sabrina Vega was everything a mother could want for her son on paper. Beautiful, charming, from a respectable family in Boston. She worked in marketing for a tech startup and seemed to adore Michael, yet from our first meeting 2 years ago, something had felt off. Call it maternal intuition or the instincts honed by decades of reading people as a night shift nurse, but I'd never quite warmed to her. "You look so handsome," I said, brushing an imaginary speck from his lapel. "I'm going to check on the flowers." The coordinator seemed overwhelmed. I left the groom's room and wandered through the church's familiar halls. St. Margaret's had been my spiritual home for decades. I'd been baptized here, married here, and said goodbye to my husband here. These stone walls had witnessed every major moment of my life. As I passed the bride's dressing room, I heard voices, Sabrina's distinctive laugh, high and tinkling like breaking glass. The door was slightly ajar. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was simply going to knock and offer my assistance. But her next words stopped me cold. "Just 6 more months, maybe 8 if I need to be careful," Sabrina was saying. Her voice carried a hard edge I'd never heard before. "Once the inheritance from his grandmother's trust clears and I get my name on the deed to that Vermont property, I'm filing for divorce. Marcus has already found us a place in Miami." My knees went weak. I pressed my hand against the cool stone wall to steady myself. Another voice, her sister Carmen, I recognized, giggled. "Poor Michael has no idea?" "Please," Sabrina scoffed. "He's so desperate for the whole white picket fence fantasy. It was almost too easy. The pregnancy scare last month really sealed the deal. He practically begged me to move up the wedding date." "But you're not actually—" "God, no. Can you imagine? I told him it was a false alarm, but by then the wedding was already moved up. Perfect timing, really. The sooner we marry, the sooner I can start the clock on my exit strategy." The room spun. I clutched my pearl necklace, a nervous habit I'd developed after my husband's death, and forced myself to breathe. 40 years of working in hospital emergency rooms had taught me to stay calm in crisis, to think clearly when others panicked. But this wasn't a medical emergency I could treat with proper protocols and procedures. This was my son's heart, about to be shattered by a woman who saw him as nothing more than a financial opportunity. I heard rustling from inside the room and quickly moved away from the door, my mind racing. The wedding was in less than 2 hours. 200 guests were already beginning to arrive. Michael was in the next room, glowing with happiness, about to pledge his life to a woman who was already planning her escape. I found myself in the small prayer garden behind the church, sinking onto a stone bench. The October air was sharp against my flushed cheeks. What kind of mother would I be if I let him walk into this trap? But what kind of mother would I be if I destroyed his happiness based on an overheard conversation? No, I knew what I'd heard. The cold calculation in Sabrina's voice, the casual cruelty of her plan. This wasn't a bride with cold feet or pre-wedding jitters. This was a predator who had stalked her prey with patience and precision. I straightened my spine, the same way I had countless times when facing down arrogant doctors or belligerent patients' families. I'd raised Michael alone after his father's sudden death from a heart attack when our son was just 12. I'd worked double shifts to pay for his college, sacrificed my own needs to ensure he had every opportunity. I'd be damned if I'd stand by and watch him be destroyed by someone who saw his kind heart as a weakness to exploit. But I had to be smart about this. Sabrina had played her role perfectly for 2 years. If I simply told Michael what I'd heard, would he believe me? Or would she spin it somehow, claim I'd misunderstood, drive a wedge between my son and me? I needed proof. I needed a plan. And I had less than 2 hours to save my son from the worst mistake of his life. The October wind whipped through my silver hair as I sat in that prayer garden, but my mind was decades away, sifting through memories that had shaped me into the woman I'd become. People often mistook my quiet demeanor for weakness. They didn't know that silence could be its own form of strength. I closed my eyes and let myself remember the night everything changed. December 15th, 23 years ago. Michael was 12, and I'd just finished a brutal 16-hour shift in the cardiac unit. I'd come home at 7:30 a.m. to find my husband, Robert, collapsed on our kitchen floor. The coffee maker was still gurgling, his favorite mug shattered beside him. The paramedics said he'd been gone for hours. Massive heart attack, no warning signs. In one moment, I went from being a wife to a widow, from having a partner to being solely responsible for our son's future. The insurance money barely covered the funeral. Robert's business partners bought out his share of the accounting firm for less than it was worth, taking advantage of my grief and inexperience. I learned quickly that the world doesn't pause for your pain. But I didn't break, couldn't break. Michael needed me. I took every extra shift the hospital offered. Night shifts paid more, and I became a creature of the darkness, caring for the sick while the rest of the world slept. I'd come home as Michael was getting ready for school, make him breakfast, quiz him on his homework, then sleep while he was in class. When he got home, I'd be up again, helping with homework, making dinner, being present for every baseball game and school play. The other nurses called me Iron Helen. They meant it as a compliment. I think I could handle the most difficult patients, the most arrogant doctors, the most heartbreaking cases. I'd held hands with dying strangers at 3 a.m., comforted grieving families, advocated fiercely for patients when bureaucracy threatened their care. Each night, I'd put on my scrubs like armor and face whatever the darkness brought. There was the time doctor. Morrison, the head of cardiology, tried to blame me for his own medication error. I'd caught it before it reached the patient, but he wanted to protect his reputation. I stood my ground, documented everything meticulously, and took it to the hospital board. He was reprimanded. I was vindicated. But more importantly, the patient lived. Or when the hospital administration tried to cut nursing staff to save money, putting lives at risk, I organized the other nurses, presented data on patient outcomes, and faced down the CEO in a board meeting. We kept our staff, Patients kept their advocates. Through it all, I never remarried. A few men showed interest over the years, but I could see through their intentions as clearly as I'd seen through that CEO's profit margins. One, a pharmaceutical salesman named Gary, seemed charming until I discovered he was more interested in Michael's college fund than in me. Another, a widower from church, revealed his controlling nature when he suggested I quit nursing because it wasn't appropriate for a woman my age. I learned to trust my instincts. They'd saved lives in the hospital and protected my son from those who would take advantage of our vulnerability. Those same instincts had been screaming about Sabrina since day one. The first time Michael brought her home, she'd been all sweetness and light, too much so. She'd complimented everything, my modest home, my simple cooking, even the faded family photos on the mantel. But I'd caught her eyeing the financial documents I'd accidentally left on the kitchen counter, saw how her interest sharpened when Michael mentioned his grandmother's trust fund. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, had been a shrewd woman who'd inherited wealth from her industrialist father. She'd set up trusts for her grandchildren, structured to mature when they married or turned 40, whichever came first. Michael stood to inherit close to $2 million, plus several properties in Vermont. He'd mentioned it casually to Sabrina early in their relationship, not realizing he'd just painted a target on his back. I'd tried, subtly, to warn him, suggested they take things slow, recommended premarital counseling, even offered to pay for a financial advisor to help them plan their future together. Michael had laughed off my concerns, accused me of being overprotective. "Mom, not everyone's out to get us," he'd said. "Sabrina loves me for me." Now, sitting in that prayer garden with the truth burning in my chest, I realized my silence had been a mistake. I'd chosen to keep the peace rather than risk my relationship with my son, but what good was our relationship if I let him walk into this trap? The church bells chimed once, 1 p.m., 1 hour until the ceremony. I thought of all the times I'd fought for strangers in hospital beds, how I'd stood up to doctors who dismissed patients' pain, administrators who prioritized profits over people, insurance companies that denied necessary treatments. I'd been a warrior for others my entire career. Now it was time to be a warrior for my son. But this battle would require different tactics. In the hospital, I'd had policies and procedures to back me up, colleagues who would support me, documentation to prove my case. Here. I had only overheard words and a mother's intuition. Sabrina had played her part perfectly for 2 years. She'd fooled everyone, Michael's friends, our extended family, even our pastor who'd counseled them before the wedding. I stood up, brushing October leaves from my navy dress. The mother of the groom was supposed to wear beige or pastels, but I'd chosen navy, the color of my old nursing scrubs, armor for a different kind of battle. Sabrina thought she was dealing with a weak old woman, someone she could manipulate and discard along with my son. She'd counted on my politeness, my desire to avoid conflict, my fear of losing Michael's love, but she'd miscalculated. She didn't know about the nights I'd stayed awake for 36 hours straight to save a patient. She didn't know about the times I'd gone hungry so Michael could have new school supplies. She didn't know about the steel spine hidden beneath my soft cardigans and gentle smile. I walked back toward the church, my low heels clicking on the stone path with purpose. 40 years of night shifts had taught me patience. 40 years of single motherhood had taught me strategy. And 40 years of loss had taught me that sometimes the hardest battles are fought in silence, with careful planning and perfect timing. Sabrina wanted to play games with my family's future, fine, but she'd chosen the wrong opponent. I'd faced down death itself in those hospital corridors. One calculating bride was nothing compared to that. The real question was, how far was I willing to go to save my son? The answer came as clearly as the October sky above, as far as necessary. My hands were steady as I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Evelyn Cross. We'd met 15 years ago when her mother was dying in my ward. I'd bent a few rules to let Evelyn stay past visiting hours, held her hand through the hardest night of her life. She'd never forgotten. Now a senior partner at Cross & Associates, specializing in family law. She told me to call if I ever needed anything. I'd never taken her up on it. Until now. Helen? What a lovely surprise. Her voice was warm but professional. Evelyn, I need your help. Urgently. Can we speak privately? A pause. Of course. Give me one moment. I heard a door close. What's wrong? I told her everything, keeping my voice low as wedding guests milled around the church grounds. When I finished, she whistled softly. Helen, this is serious, but overheard conversations are tricky legally. We need concrete evidence. Can you get me her full name, date of birth, and previous addresses? I have all that from the wedding planning documents, I said, already walking toward my car where I'd left my folder. Sabrina Maria Vega, born March 12, 1991. Previous addresses in Boston, Miami, and that's odd. Phoenix before that, but she told Michael she'd never lived there. Send me everything you have. I'll run a comprehensive background check. My investigator owes me a favor. He'll expedite this. How much time do we have? I glanced at my watch. 45 minutes. I'll call you back in 30. I sat in my car, windows cracked for air, and forwarded every document I had about Sabrina. Then I opened my laptop. I always kept it with me, a habit from years of catching up on medical journals during breaks. My fingers flew across the keyboard, searching for any trace of Sabrina Vega online. Her social media was carefully curated, photos with Michael, charity events, yoga classes, but I'd learned from catching medication errors that it's what's missing that often tells the real story. No photos from before 2021, no college friends commenting on her posts, no family members except her sister Carmen. I tried different search combinations. Sabrina Vega Phoenix. Nothing. Sabrina M. Vega court records. A hit. My stomach dropped. A divorce filing in Maricopa County, Arizona. Sabrina Vega versus David Thornton. Filed in 2019. I couldn't access the full records, but the case summary mentioned disputed assets and allegations of fraud. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Mom, where are you? Photos in 20 minutes. I typed back, small emergency. Be there soon. Then I called the church office. St. Margaret's. How may I help you? This is Helen Whitmore. I need to speak with Father Murphy about the sound system for the wedding. It's urgent. 2 minutes later, I was in the church's small tech booth with Jason, the 20-something audio technician who handled the church's live streams. Mrs. Whitmore, Father Murphy said you needed help with the sound? I pulled out $500 cash from my emergency fund. Jason, I need you to do something for me. No questions asked. His eyes widened at the money. What do you need? I have an audio file on my phone. When I give you a signal during the ceremony, I need you to play it through the church speakers. Can you do that? He looked uncomfortable. I don't know. Mrs. Whitmore, that seems... My son is about to make a terrible mistake, Ma, I said, letting my desperation show. Please, I'm trying to save him. Maybe it was the mother's pain in my voice, or maybe it was the cash, but Jason nodded slowly. What's the signal? I'll drop my handkerchief. White lace. You'll see it from up here? Yeah, I can see the whole church from here. I transferred the audio file I'd recorded on my phone, my own voice reading Sabrina's words. Since I hadn't recorded the actual conversation, it wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. My phone rang. Evelyn. Helen, you need to hear this. Sabrina Vega has been married twice before. Once in Phoenix to David Thornton, divorced after 18 months when he discovered she'd been siphoning money to an account in the Cayman Islands. He didn't press charges because she agreed to forfeit all claims to his assets. And the second? Miami, 2021, married a real estate developer named Carlos Mendez. That lasted 8 months. He died in a boating accident. My blood chilled. Accident? Officially, yes. But here's the interesting part. She inherited a significant sum from his life insurance. And guess who was with her in Miami during that time? A man named Marcus Lane. They've maintained a joint account since 2020. She mentioned Marcus, said he'd found them a place in Miami. Helen, there's more. I found a pattern. She targets men with family money, particularly trusts or inheritances. She's used 3 different variations of her name. And that pregnancy scare she mentioned? She pulled the same thing with Thornton. It's her MO to speed up marriages. Can you prove any of this? I'm emailing you everything now. Court records, property transfers, even some photos my investigator found of her and Marcus together last month. But Helen, be careful. If she's done this twice before successfully, she's dangerous. I finished. I know, but she picked the wrong family this time. I heard organ music beginning inside the church, the prelude. Guests were being seated. Evelyn, one more thing. Can you freeze Michael's trust fund? Prevent any transfers after marriage? I'll need his consent for that, or a court order showing potential fraud, but I can file an emergency injunction based on what we've found. It'll at least delay any transfers while we investigate. Do it. I ended the call and checked the emails flooding in. Photos of Sabrina with Marcus at a Miami restaurant dated just 3 weeks ago. His hand on her waist, her engagement ring conspicuously absent. Court documents showing a pattern of financial manipulation. A police report from Phoenix where Thornton had initially accused her of theft before withdrawing the complaint. I forwarded everything to Michael's email with the subject line, "Read this if you ever trusted me, Mom." Then I screenshot the most damning evidence and airdropped it to my laptop. The wedding coordinator appeared at my car window, looking frazzled. "Mrs. Whitmore, we need you for photos." "Coming," I said, gathering my evidence. I slipped the printed pages into my clutch, alongside the flash drive I'd prepared as backup. As I walked back to the church, I saw Sabrina through a window, laughing with her bridesmaids. She looked radiant in her $10,000 dress, paid for by Michael, of course. The dress that would be her costume for the greatest performance of her con artist career? Or so she thought. I straightened my navy dress, touched the pearl necklace Robert had given me for our 10th anniversary, and prepared for war. Sabrina thought she was marrying my son in 30 minutes. She was wrong. The only question now was whether I'd destroy her quietly or publicly. As I entered the church and saw Michael's trusting face, saw the happiness in his eyes that was built on lies, I made my decision. Sabrina wanted to perform, then I'd give her the stage she deserved, and an audience of 200 to witness her final act. The photographer was arranging us for family portraits when I made my first move. As Sabrina adjusted her veil, I stepped close to her, ostensibly to fix a strand of her hair. "Such a beautiful bride," I murmured, loud enough for others to hear. Then, lowering my voice to a whisper only she could catch, "Marcus must be so proud of your performance." Her body went rigid. For just a second, her mask slipped, and I saw the calculating predator beneath, but she recovered quickly, letting out a tinkling laugh. "Oh, Helen, you're so sweet. I don't know any Marcus, though you must be thinking of someone else." "My mistake," I said pleasantly, stepping back. "I could have sworn I saw you with someone by that name in Miami last month, but then my old eyes aren't what they used to be." I watched her process this, saw the moment she decided I was bluffing. After all, what could a 68-year-old widow from Vermont know about her life in Miami? She'd underestimated me. Good. The photos continued, but I could see Sabrina's composure cracking at the edges. She kept glancing at me, trying to read my face. I gave her nothing but maternal warmth, even as I planned her destruction. "Mrs. Whitmore," the coordinator called, "we need you in the vestibule. It's time to line up." I took my place, clutching my small bouquet of white roses. Michael stood at the altar, his groomsmen beside him. 200 guests filled the pews. Sabrina's family occupied the left side, her parents flown in from California, looking uncomfortable in their formal wear. They seemed like decent people. I wondered if they knew what their daughter really was. The music changed. The bridesmaids began their procession. I counted each step, each second bringing us closer to the moment of truth. Jason was in position in the tech booth. Evelyn had texted confirmation that the emergency injunction was filed. My evidence was ready. But I needed one more piece, something irrefutable. As the last bridesmaid took her place, I stepped out of line. "Helen?" the coordinator hissed. "What are you doing?" "I need to give Sabrina something," I said calmly. "A family heirloom. It'll just take a moment." Before anyone could stop me, I walked to the bride's room. Sabrina was there with her sister, taking a final sip of champagne. They both froze when they saw me. "Helen, you should be in the processional." "I wanted to give you this," I said, pulling out my phone, but instead of showing her anything, I simply held it at my side, recording. "And to ask you one question, woman to woman, do you love my son?" Carmen started to intervene, but Sabrina waved her off. Maybe it was the champagne. Maybe it was overconfidence. Or maybe she just wanted to twist the knife a little deeper. But she smiled. That cold, beautiful smile I'd seen her practice in mirrors. "Love?" She laughed. "Oh, Helen, love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't buy beachfront property or first-class tickets to Europe. Your son is sweet, I'll give him that. So eager to please. So desperate for family after growing up with just you. It made him incredibly easy to—" "To what?" I prompted, my voice steady despite my rage. "To manage," she finished, her eyes glittering. 6 months, maybe 8, and I'll have everything I need. The trust fund, the properties, and my freedom. Marcus and I have waited long enough. And the pregnancy scare." She actually winked. "Works every time. Men are so predictable when they think there might be a baby. Although with Michael, I barely needed it. He was already so eager to lock me down." She adjusted her veil in the mirror. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a wedding to attend. Your son is waiting." I stopped recording and smiled. "Yes, he is. Thank you for your honesty. Sabrina, it's refreshing." I left them there. Carmen looking uncertain. Sabrina still preening. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd put the pathetic old mother in her place. Back in the vestibule, I took my position as the music swelled. The congregation rose, the massive oak doors opened, and I walked down that aisle. Each step measured and deliberate. I saw faces I'd known for decades. Neighbors, Michael's teachers, family friends, good people who'd come to celebrate what they believed was true love. At the altar, I kissed Michael's cheek and took my seat in the front pew. My hand found my clutch, feeling the weight of the evidence inside, the flash drive with financial records, the photos of Sabrina with Marcus, the court documents from 2 previous marriages. And now, the crown jewel, her confession in her own voice, recorded just minutes ago. The wedding march began. Everyone turned to watch Sabrina enter, radiant in white, her father at her side. She floated down the aisle like she owned the world. In her mind, she probably did. In just a few minutes, she'd be Mrs. Michael Whitmore with access to millions. I fingered the white lace handkerchief in my lap. Jason would be watching for it. One drop and Sabrina's own words would fill this sacred space. But not yet. I wanted her to get closer to her goal before I snatched it away. Father Murphy began the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." I watched Sabrina's performance, the loving gazes, the trembling smile, the single tear that rolled down her cheek at just the right moment. She was good. I'd give her that. Oscar-worthy, really. If anyone here knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The church held its breath. This was it. The moment in movies where someone dramatically objects, but I stayed silent. Not yet. Let her think she'd won. Father Murphy smiled, relieved, and continued. "Do you, Michael Robert Whitmore, take this woman?" I watched my son, memorizing his face in this last moment of innocence. After today, he'd never trust quite the same way again. But a broken heart could heal. A life destroyed by a con artist might not— "I do," Michael said, his voice strong and clear. "Do you, Sabrina Maria Vega, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer?" The irony of those words wasn't lost on me. For richer, definitely. For poorer, She'd be gone before the ink dried on the joint accounts. "I do," Sabrina said, her voice dripping with false emotion. "The rings, please." This was my moment, as the best man fumbled for the rings, as all eyes turned to watch the small comedy of dropped pillows and nervous laughter. I stood. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the church, "but I cannot let this continue." The congregation gasped. Michael's face went white. Sabrina's eyes found mine, and for the first time, I saw fear there. "Mom?" Michael's voice broke. "What are you doing?" I pulled out my phone, my movements deliberate and calm. 40 years of emergency rooms had taught me that panic was contagious, but controlled authority commanded respect. "There's something everyone needs to hear," I said, something I recorded just minutes ago when I asked Sabrina a simple question. "Does she love my son?" "This is ridiculous," Sabrina shrieked. "Michael, don't listen to her. She's trying to ruin our day." But I'd already hit play. Sabrina's voice, clear and cruel, filled the church. "Love? Oh, Helen. Love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't buy beachfront property or first-class tickets to Europe. Your son is sweet. I'll give him that. So eager to please. So desperate for family after growing up with just you. It made him incredibly easy to manage." The church erupted. Sabrina lunged for my phone, but I stepped back, letting the recording continue. Her confession about the trust fund, the properties, Marcus, the fake pregnancy, all of it echoed off the stone walls while 200 witnesses listened in stunned silence. "It's fake!" Sabrina screamed. "She's lying! That's not me!" But Carmen, her own sister, was backing away from her, shaking her head. She'd been there. She'd heard it too. "There's more," I said, pulling out the printed evidence. 2 previous marriages, financial fraud, a boyfriend named Marcus Lane waiting for her in Miami. I handed the papers to Father Murphy. "It's all here. Court records, bank statements, photos from 3 weeks ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stood at the altar like a statue, his face drained of all color. The bouquet in his hands trembled as he stared at Sabrina, then at me, then back at his bride. I wanted to run to him, to hold him like I had when he was small and the world had hurt him, but I stayed where I was. He needed to see this through. "Michael," Sabrina's voice had changed, becoming syrupy, sweet, desperate. "Baby, you can't believe this. Your mother has always hated me. She's jealous. She doesn't want to let you go. This is all lies." But Michael was looking at her differently now, like a man waking from a dream. "The pregnancy," he said slowly. "Last month, you said it was a false alarm." "It was," she insisted, reaching for his hands. He stepped back. "But you were never worried," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "I was terrified, then overjoyed, then disappointed. But you were so calm through it all, like you knew exactly what would happen." Father Murphy cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion in private." "No," Michael said firmly. "No, I want to hear this. Mom, play it again." I played the recording once more. This time, I watched the congregation's faces transform from shock to anger. Sabrina's parents had risen from their pew, her mother's hand pressed to her mouth in horror. The groomsmen shifted uncomfortably, while the bridesmaids, except for Carmen, huddled together, whispering. When it finished, Michael turned to Sabrina. "Is it true? Any of it?" For a moment, just a fleeting second, I saw her consider continuing the lie, then, perhaps recognizing the futility, she straightened her spine and lifted her chin. The mask finally fell completely. "You want the truth?" She laughed, but it was harsh now. Nothing like the tinkling sound she'd perfected. "Fine. Yes, I was going to divorce you. Yes, Marcus exists. And yes, I've done this before. So what? You think you're special, Michael? You're just another Mark with more money than sense." The congregation gasped. Someone, I think it was Michael's aunt, sobbed audibly. "But here's what your precious mother didn't tell you," Sabrina continued, her voice rising. "I gave you 2 years of my life. 2 years of pretending to care about your boring architecture stories, your fantasy football league, your mother's passive-aggressive dinners. Do you have any idea how mind-numbing it was? Listening to you plan our future while I counted down the days? Each word was a dagger to Michael's heart. I saw him flinch with every cruel revelation. But I also saw something else. The strength I'd tried to instill in him surfacing. His shoulders squared, his jaw set. "Get out," he said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my church. Get out of my life, now." Sabrina's face contorted with rage. "You can't just, I have rights. We have deposits, contracts." "Sue me," Michael said. "I'm sure you know plenty of lawyers." She spun to face me then, her beauty twisted into something ugly. "You think you've won, you bitter old woman? You think he'll thank you for this? You've ruined your relationship with your son forever." I met her gaze steadily. Perhaps. But I'd rather lose him temporarily to the truth than watch him lose himself permanently to your lies. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll destroy both of you. Marcus has connections, resources, and I have evidence of fraud across state lines." I interrupted calmly. "Making this a federal matter, I'm sure the FBI would be very interested in your pattern of marriage fraud, especially given the suspicious circumstances of Carlos Mendez's death." That stopped her cold. The blood drained from her face as she realized the implications. Without another word, she grabbed her skirts and ran down the aisle, her designer heels clicking against the stone floor. Carmen hesitated, then followed her sister, pausing only to mouth, "I'm sorry," to Michael. The church doors slammed behind them with a finality that echoed through the space. For a long moment, nobody moved. 200 guests sat frozen, unsure of the protocol for a wedding that had imploded so spectacularly. Michael stood at the altar, still in his perfect suit, looking lost. Father Murphy, bless him, took charge. "Ladies and gentlemen, under the circumstances, I think it best if we, that is to say," he looked at Michael. "My son, what would you like to do?" Michael was staring at the stained glass windows, their colored light playing across his face. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. "I'd like everyone to leave. Please, just go." People began filing out quietly, some stopping to squeeze Michael's shoulder or murmur condolences. His groomsmen hovered uncertainly until he waved them away. Sabrina's family slunk out without a word, her father's face burning with shame. I remained in my pew, waiting. The church emptied slowly, voices fading as guests made their way to cars, no doubt already spreading the story. The wedding of the year had become the scandal of the decade. Finally, only Michael and I remained in the vast space. He sank onto the altar steps, his head in his hands. I rose and walked to him, my heels echoing in the silence. I sat beside him, careful not to touch him. He had to make the first move. "How long did you know?" he asked finally, his voice muffled by his hands. "I heard her talking to Carmen an hour ago, but I suspected something was off for much longer. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me?" He raised his head then, and the pain in his eyes nearly broke me. "I loved her. Mom, I really loved her." "I know, sweetheart, I know." Was any of it real? Even a moment? I thought about lying, about softening the blow, but he deserved the truth. "I don't think so." "I'm sorry." He laughed bitterly. 2 years of my life, and it was all a performance. How did I not see it? "Because you have a good heart," I said. "Because you believe the best in people. Those aren't flaws. Michael, someone took advantage of your virtues. That's on her, not you." "Everyone was watching," he said. "Everyone saw me get played for a fool. How am I supposed to face them?" "With your head held high," I said firmly. "You did nothing wrong. You loved someone. You committed to building a life with them. The fact that she was incapable of appreciating that reflects on her character, not yours." We sat in silence for a while, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows. Somewhere outside, church bells were ringing, another wedding, perhaps, or just marking the hour. Life going on, indifferent to one man's heartbreak. "The reception," Michael said suddenly. "There's food for 200 people. The band, the cake." "I'll handle it," I said. "Evelyn, my lawyer friend, has a list of shelters that would be grateful for the food. The band and venue will understand. These things happen." "Do they?" He looked at me incredulously. "Do weddings usually explode because the bride is revealed as a serial con artist?" "Maybe not exactly like this," I admitted, "but people show their true colors at weddings more often than you'd think. High emotions, family dynamics, money concerns, it all comes out." He was quiet again, processing. Then, "Thank you." "For what?" "For saving me. Even though I'm angry, even though I'm humiliated, even though part of me wishes you'd just let it happen. Thank you. 5 years from now, when she'd taken everything and left, I would have been destroyed. At least now I still have my dignity, my assets, my future." I finally allowed myself to touch him, placing my hand over his. "You'll find real love. Michael. Someone who sees you, not your bank account. Someone who loves your architecture stories and your fantasy football league. Someone who actually wants the future you're planning." "I can't even think about that right now." "You don't have to. Take your time. Heal. Learn to trust yourself again. There's no rush." He squeezed my hand. Will you stay with me for a while? I don't want to go home to the apartment. Too many memories." "Of course. Your old room is always ready." We stood together, mother and son, in the church where he should have been married. The altar flowers mocked us with their beauty. The unity candle stood unlit. The wedding programs lay scattered on pews like fallen leaves. But we were standing. We were together, and sometimes that's all the victory you need. The moment I played that recording, I knew there was no going back. As Sabrina's voice filled the church, each word sharp and cruel, I watched the devastation ripple through the congregation like a stone dropped in still water. "Love? Oh, Helen, love doesn't pay the bills." Her voice echoed off the stone walls, and I saw Michael's knees buckle slightly. His best man, Tom, reached out to steady him, but Michael shook him off, standing straighter. My boy was trying so hard to be strong, even as his world crumbled around him. The recording continued, each revelation worse than the last. The fake pregnancy, Marcus, the plan to divorce within months. I watched Sabrina's face cycle through emotions, shock, rage, calculation. She was cornered, and like any trapped predator, she was dangerous. "Turn it off," she shrieked, lunging toward me. "Turn it off right now." But Father Murphy stepped between us, his aged frame suddenly formidable. "Young lady, I think you should stay where you are." The recording ended, leaving a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Then chaos erupted. "You manipulative witch!" This from Michael's cousin Janet, who'd flown in from Seattle. "How dare you!" "Michael gave up a promotion in New York for you," Tom shouted, his face red with fury. "He turned down his dream job because you said you couldn't leave Boston." Sabrina's parents were on their feet, her mother weeping, her father's face a mask of humiliation. They'd paid for half this wedding, believing their daughter had finally found happiness. The betrayal was written in every line of their bodies. "Sabrina, is this true?" her father demanded, his voice breaking. "Tell me this is some kind of mistake." But Sabrina had abandoned all pretense. Her beautiful mask had shattered completely, revealing the calculating coldness beneath. "Oh, spare me the theatrics. Dad, like you didn't marry Mom for her father's construction business." "Mrs.?" Vega gasped. "That's not. We fell in love." "Sure you did," Sabrina sneered. "Just like I fell in love with Michael's trust fund." The cruelty of it, the casual destruction of multiple relationships, took my breath away. She wasn't just revealing herself. She was burning everything down with her. "Enough!" Michael's voice cut through the chaos. He stood at the altar like a judge passing sentence, his face carved from stone. "Sabrina, get out, now." "Or what?" She laughed, high and sharp. "You'll call security? Have me arrested? For what? Not loving you? That's not a crime, Michael." "No," I said, stepping forward with my phone still in hand. "But fraud is, identity theft is, and I'm sure the Phoenix District Attorney would be very interested in reopening David Thornton's case, especially with new evidence." Her laugh died. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," I said quietly. "I've spent 40 years protecting my son. Do you really think I'll stop now?" She looked around the church, perhaps hoping for an ally, but found only faces twisted with disgust and anger. Even her bridesmaids had stepped away from her, as if her corruption might be contagious. "This isn't over," she hissed, gathering her skirts. "You'll pay for this, both of you." "The only payment will be yours," I replied, "to the lawyers, and possibly to the state if they decide to prosecute." She ran then, her designer heels clicking frantically against the floor. Carmen hesitated at the church doors, looking back at Michael with what might have been genuine regret before following her sister into the October afternoon. The silence that followed was deafening. 200 guests sat frozen, unsure whether to comfort, condemn, or simply flee. The wedding coordinator looked like she might faint. The photographer was still reflexively taking pictures, documenting the disaster. Father Murphy cleared his throat. Perhaps we should all take a moment to— "And everyone out, Nye?" Michael's voice was quiet but firm. "Please, I need everyone to leave." They filed out slowly, a funeral procession for a marriage that never was. Some tried to approach Michael, but he held up his hand, stopping them. His groomsmen looked to me for guidance, but I shook my head. He needed space to process this. I heard fragments of conversation as people left. Always thought something was off about her. Poor Michael. How humiliating. Helen did the right thing. Can you imagine if she'd waited until after? Soon, the church was empty except for Michael and me. He stood at the altar where he should have been saying his vows, staring at the spot where Sabrina had stood. The afternoon light streaming through the stained glass painted him in blues and golds, like a figure from a medieval painting, a saint in his moment of martyrdom. "Was it worth it?" he asked without turning around. "Was what worth it? Destroying my wedding, humiliating me in front of everyone I know, breaking my heart in the most public way possible." Each word was a knife, but I absorbed them. This was his pain talking, not his true feelings. At least, I hope so. "Would it have been better to find out in 6 months?" I asked. "When she drained your accounts and disappeared to Miami? When you discovered the pregnancy was fake? When you realized every 'I love you' was a lie?" He spun to face me then, and the anguish in his eyes nearly brought me to my knees. At least then it would have been private. At least then I wouldn't be the town joke, the idiot who almost married a con artist. "You're not an idiot, Ma," I said firmly. "You're a good man who loved the wrong woman. There's no shame in having a heart." "Everyone saw," he said, his voice breaking. "Everyone watched me stand up here like a fool while my mother exposed my fiancé as a fraud. Do you know what they're saying right now? What they'll say for years? That your mother loves you enough to save you from a terrible mistake," I said. "That you're lucky to have family who protects you. That you showed incredible strength in an impossible situation." He laughed bitterly. "Strength. I wanted to die. Mom, when I heard her voice on that recording, when I realized everything was a lie, I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me." "But you didn't run," I pointed out. "You stood your ground, you faced the truth, you sent her away. That takes more strength than you know." He sank onto the altar steps, his head in his hands. I wanted to go to him, but I waited. He needed to feel this, to process it, to begin the long journey of healing. "The worst part," he said finally, "is that I still love her, even knowing what she is, even hearing those horrible things. Part of me still loves the woman I thought she was." "That's not weakness," I said gently. "That's humanity. The love you felt was real. Even if hers wasn't, it will take time for your heart to catch up with your head." "How long?" And he looked up at me. tears streaming down his face. How long before I stop seeing her face when I close my eyes? How long before I can trust anyone again? I don't know, I admitted, but you will heal. You will love again, and next time, you'll choose someone worthy of you. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I need to get out of here. Can you handle everything? The reception, the gifts, I'll take care of it all. I promised. Evelyn is already working on the legal aspects. The deposits will be returned. The gifts will be sent back. The food will go to good use at the shelter. You don't have to worry about any of it. He stood slowly, like an old man, though he was only 35. I'm going to stay at Tom's for a while. I can't go back to the apartment. Too many memories. Your room at home is always available, I offered. I know, but I need some space. From everything, from everyone. He paused. Even from you. That hurt more than I expected, but I understood. Of course. Take all the time you need. He started to leave, then turned back. Mom, thank you. I'm angry and hurt and humiliated, but thank you. You saved my life today. Then he was gone, walking out of the church with his shoulders bowed but his head high. My son, my brave, broken boy, facing a future that looked nothing like the one he'd planned. I stood alone in the empty church, surrounded by flowers meant for a celebration that had become a catastrophe, but I felt no regret. I'd done what needed to be done. I'd protected my child, even when it meant becoming the villain in his story. That's what mothers do. We bear the hard truths. We make the impossible choices. We stand as shields between our children and those who would harm them, even when they hate us for it. Outside, I could hear cars leaving, voices fading, life moving on. Tomorrow, the gossip would start, the story would spread. Michael would have to face the whispers and the pity. But he would face them free, unencumbered by a woman who saw him as nothing more than a bank account, able to find real love when he was ready. I gathered my things and walked out of the church, my navy dress catching the late afternoon breeze. I'd won the battle, but the war for Michael's healing had just begun. And I would be there for every step of it, whether he wanted me or not, because that's what mothers do. We endure. The hours after the wedding passed in a blur of necessary tasks. I stood in the reception hall, directing the catering staff to pack up food for the homeless shelter. 200 perfectly plated dinners, a 5-tier cake, enough champagne for an army. All of it would find its way to people who needed it more than we did. Mrs. Whitmore? The venue coordinator approached nervously. About the balance due. Send the final invoice to this address, I said, handing her Evelyn's business card. My attorney will handle all financial matters related to today. She nodded, relief evident on her face. I'm so sorry about what happened. In 20 years of coordinating weddings, I've never seen anything like it. Neither have I said simply. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts from family, friends, people who'd witnessed the spectacle. I ignored them all except for Evelyn's updates. Sabrina left the state. Airport security confirmed she boarded a flight to Miami at 4:15 p.m. Marcus Lane was waiting at arrivals. Thornton wants to testify if we pursue charges. He's been waiting years for justice. Michael's trust is secure. No documents were signed. No access was granted. Each message was a small victory, but they felt hollow. What good was protecting Michael's money when his heart was shattered? I was supervising the flower removal when Tom appeared. Michael's best friend since college looked haggard, his bow tie undone, his usually cheerful face drawn with concern. How is he? I asked immediately. Drunk, Tom said bluntly. Sitting on my couch, working his way through my bourbon collection. Can't say I blame him. Is he talking? Some. Mostly about how he missed the signs. Keeps going over every conversation, every moment, looking for the red flags. Tom ran his hand through his hair. Mrs. W., what you did today. I know it was hard, but thank you. We all suspected something was off with Sabrina, but Michael was so happy. You suspected? This was news to me. Little things. She never wanted to hang out with the group unless Michael was buying. Always had excuses when we did cheap stuff like game nights or potlucks. And that time, she thought Michael's promotion came with a $50,000 raise instead of 15. Her whole demeanor changed when he corrected her. Why didn't anyone say anything? Tom looked ashamed. We tried, subtly, but Michael got defensive, said we were jealous, that we couldn't accept he'd found someone. After that, we just hoped we were wrong. I understood, the same way I'd held my tongue for 2 years, choosing peace over truth. We'd all failed Michael in our silence. Take care of him, I said. He won't want to see me for a while. He doesn't blame you, Tom said quickly. Not really. He's just humiliated, heartbroken, confused. I know. I touched Tom's shoulder. Just be his friend. That's what he needs right now. After Tom left, I returned to the empty church to collect the gifts. Each beautifully wrapped box felt like a mockery now. Crystal stemware for toasts that would never happen. Linens for a home that would never exist. Picture frames for photos of a family that was built on lies. Father Murphy found me there, boxing up someone's generous check. Helen, he said gently, how are you holding up? I laughed, surprising us both. I just destroyed my son's wedding. Father exposed his bride as a fraud in front of 200 people. How do you think I'm holding up? You saved him, Father Murphy said firmly, from a life of deception, from financial ruin, from a woman who would have destroyed his capacity to trust and love. Did I? I sank into a pew, suddenly exhausted. Or did I just destroy it myself, in a different way? Father Murphy sat beside me, his presence comforting. I've married hundreds of couples in this church. Helen, I've seen true love, and I've seen marriages of convenience, desperation, and yes, deception. What you revealed today, that woman was a predator. She targeted your son deliberately, systematically. You did what any loving parent would do. Most loving parents wouldn't have recordings and evidence ready to destroy a wedding. I pointed out, most parents don't have your strength, he countered, or your wisdom. Michael will understand in time. Will he? I asked. Or will he always see me as the woman who humiliated him on what should have been the happiest day of his life? He'll see you as the woman who loved him enough to risk his hatred to save his future, Father Murphy said. That's the greatest love of all, the kind that sacrifices itself for another's well-being. His words were kind, but they didn't ease the ache in my chest, somewhere in this town. My son was drowning his sorrows, unable to look at me. And somewhere in Miami, Sabrina was probably already planning her next con, her next victim. My phone rang. Evelyn. Helen, I just got off the phone with the Phoenix DA's office. They're very interested in reopening the Thornton case. With his testimony and the evidence we've gathered, they think they have enough to pursue charges. Good, I said, though I felt no satisfaction. What about the Mendez death? That's trickier. Miami PD says the case is closed, but they're willing to take another look given the new information about her pattern of behavior. No promises, though. And Michael's assets? Completely protected. I've also put alerts on all his accounts, his credit, everything. If she tries anything, we'll know immediately. Thank you. Evelyn, send me your bill. Don't insult me. Helen, you held my hand through the worst night of my life. This doesn't begin to repay that debt. After we hung up, I finished packing the gifts. Each card would need to be returned with a note. Miss Manners probably didn't cover the etiquette for, sorry, the wedding was canceled when the bride was exposed as a serial con artist, but I'd figure something out. The sun was setting by the time I finally left the church. The parking lot was empty except for my car and a familiar figure leaning against it. Carmen, Sabrina's sister. I tensed, ready for confrontation, but she held up her hands peacefully. I'm not here to cause trouble, she said quickly. I wanted to apologize and to give you this. She handed me a flash drive. What is this? Emails, texts, screenshots of conversations between Sabrina and Marcus going back 3 years. I've been collecting them, trying to figure out how to stop her. I'm not brave like you. I couldn't stand up to her. I studied the young woman. She looked nothing like her beautiful, poisonous sister. Plain features, kind eyes, shoulders bent with the weight of secrets. You knew what she was planning? Carmen nodded miserably. She's done it twice before. Each time. She promised it was the last time, that she just needed enough money to start fresh. But it's never enough. She and Marcus, they're addicted to the game as much as the money. Why didn't you warn Michael? She's my sister, Carmen said simply. I kept hoping she'd change, that maybe this time, with a good man like Michael, she'd realize what she was throwing away. She laughed bitterly. Stupid, right? Hopeful, I corrected. There's a difference. Carmen looked at the church, its steeple dark against the sunset. For what it's worth, I think Michael was the closest she ever came to really caring about someone. Sometimes, when he'd make her laugh, really laugh, not that fake sound she usually made, I'd see glimpses of who she used to be, before Marcus, before the money became everything. It doesn't excuse what she did. No, Carmen agreed. It doesn't. I just thought, maybe it would help Michael to know that someday, when he's ready to hear it. She walked away before I could respond. Disappearing into the gathering dusk, I looked at the flash drive in my hand. More evidence, more proof of Sabrina's deceptions. But what good would it do now? The damage was done. I drove home through streets I'd known my whole life, past the hospital where I'd worked for decades, past the school where Michael had graduated valedictorian, past the park where he'd learned to ride a bike. This town was full of memories. And now it would forever include this one, the day I saved my son by breaking his heart. At home. I poured myself a glass of wine, something I rarely did, and sat in my kitchen. The silence was oppressive. Usually, Michael would call on Saturday evenings, telling me about his week, his projects, his plans with Sabrina. That wouldn't happen tonight, maybe not for many nights to come. But I'd done the right thing. I knew that in my bones, the same way I'd known when to push a medication despite a doctor's doubts, when to insist on one more test that revealed a hidden condition. Sometimes, love meant making the hard choices, bearing the anger, accepting the consequences. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You'll regret this, both of you. See, I deleted it without responding. Sabrina Vega had no power here anymore. She was just another predator, exposed and defanged, slithering away to find easier prey. I raised my glass to the empty kitchen, to my absent son, to the wedding that wasn't, to the truth, I said aloud, however much it hurts. The wine was bitter on my tongue, but I drank it anyway. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, gossip to face, explanations to give, a son to heal. But tonight, I sat alone with my choices, my courage and my unshakable love for a boy who might hate me now but would thank me someday. The battle was won, Sabrina was gone, Michael was safe. Everything else would have to wait for morning. 3 weeks had passed since the wedding that wasn't. October had given way to November, and the Vermont mountains were dressed in their last autumn colors before winter's arrival. I sat in my garden, wrapped in Robert's old cardigan, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The fallout had been swift and complete. Sabrina was gone. Really gone. Evelyn had confirmed she'd been arrested in Miami on fraud charges, with both Arizona and Massachusetts building cases against her. Marcus Lane had disappeared, abandoning her the moment legal trouble arrived. There was poetic justice in that. I supposed. Even thieves had no honor among themselves. The doorbell rang, interrupting my solitude. I wasn't expecting anyone. The stream of well-wishers and gossip-seekers had finally dried up, leaving me in blessed peace. I opened the door to find Michael standing there, hands in his pockets, looking thinner than when I'd last seen him. His eyes were clearer, though, no longer clouded with alcohol or fresh grief. "Hi, Mom." "Michael," I stepped aside. "Come in." He followed me to the kitchen, sitting at the same table where he'd told me about Sabrina 3 years ago, eyes bright with new love. Now those eyes carried wisdom bought with pain. "Tom said you've been asking about me," he said. "Every day, but I wanted to respect your need for space." He nodded, tracing patterns on the wooden table. "I've been thinking about everything, about her, about what happened, about what you did." I waited, letting him find his words. "I was so angry at first," he continued, "not just at Sabrina, but at you, for exposing it all so publicly, for not telling me privately, letting me handle it quietly." "I understand." "No, let me finish." He looked up at me then. "I've spent 3 weeks going over every moment, every sign I missed. Carmen sent me files. Did you know that? Evidence she'd been collecting. Conversations between Sabrina and Marcus dating back years. Planning every move, discussing me like I was a business transaction. I didn't know she'd sent them to you. She included a letter, said Sabrina wasn't always like this, that she fell in with Marcus Young, got addicted to the easy money, the thrill of the con, not an excuse, just context." He rubbed his face. "The things they said about me, Mom, how easy I was to manipulate, how desperate for love. They laughed about the pregnancy scare, called it the classic hook. I was nothing but a mark to them. You were never just anything, Michael. You're a good man who loved the wrong person." "That's what I've been trying to understand," he said. "Why it had to happen the way it did. Why you couldn't just tell me privately. And I think I get it now." I held my breath, waiting. If you'd told me privately, I would have confronted her. She would have lied, cried, manipulated me. Maybe I would have believed her. Maybe not. But even if I'd called off the wedding, she would have tried again. Stalked me. Blackmailed me. Who knows what else? She needed to be exposed completely, publicly, in a way she couldn't spin or escape from. "I'm sorry it had to be so painful," I said softly. "Are you?" He studied my face. "Or would you do it exactly the same way again?" I met his gaze steadily. I would do it exactly the same way again. He nodded slowly. "That's what I thought. And that's okay, Mom, because you were protecting me, the same way you always have, even when it meant I might hate you for it." "Did you hate me?" "For a few days," he admitted. "But Tom kept reminding me what could have happened, what would have happened, the trust fund, the properties, the years of lies ahead. You saved me from all of that." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I went back to the jeweler," he said, opening it to reveal the engagement ring that should have been on Sabrina's finger. "Thought about selling it, but then I had a better idea." He pulled out a second box, larger and flatter. Inside was a beautiful pendant, the diamond from the engagement ring reset into a simple, elegant necklace. "I had it remade for you," he said, "because you're the one who's always been there, the one who's never lied to me, never used me, never saw me as anything but your son who deserved to be loved for himself." Tears burned my eyes as he fastened it around my neck. The diamond caught the light, transformed from a symbol of deception into one of truth. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "You're beautiful," he said, "inside and out. I'm sorry it took me so long to see what you did for me, to thank you for being strong enough to save me, even when I couldn't save myself." I hugged my son then, feeling the weight of 3 weeks' worry lift from my shoulders. He was here. He was healing. We were okay. "What's next for you?" I asked when we finally pulled apart. "Therapy, for starters," he said with a wry smile. "Tom's recommendation. Turns out almost marrying a sociopath leaves some scars, and then, I don't know. Focus on work. Maybe take that promotion in New York after all. Start fresh somewhere new." "Running away?" "Running toward," he corrected, "toward a life that's actually mine, not one built on someone else's lies." "I'll miss you if you go." "I'll visit," he promised. "And you'll visit me. We'll do Broadway shows, eat at overpriced restaurants, all the tourist things." "I'd like that." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Mom, I know what you risked for me. Your relationship with me, your reputation, everything, that kind of love. I hope someday I find someone who loves me even half as much as you do." "You will," I said with certainty, "because now you know what real love looks like. It's not always pretty or easy or comfortable. Sometimes it's standing up in a church full of people and destroying a wedding to save someone's future, but it's always worth it." He kissed my cheek and left, walking taller than he had in weeks. I touched the pendant at my throat, feeling the weight of it, not just the diamond, but what it represented. A mother's love, a son's gratitude, a family that had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. I went back to my garden as darkness fell, but I wasn't alone anymore. Somewhere in town, Michael was planning his future, a real future, built on truth instead of lies. Somewhere in a jail cell, Sabrina was facing the consequences of her choices, and here, in my garden, I sat with the satisfaction of knowing I'd done the hardest thing a mother could do. I'd let my son hate me to save him, and he'd loved me enough to forgive me for it. The stars came out one by one, and I made a wish on the first one I saw, not for myself, but for Michael, that he would find real love someday, that he would trust again, that this pain would become just another chapter in his story, not the ending. Inside the house, my phone buzzed with messages from Evelyn about the case proceedings, from Tom about Michael's progress, from Father Murphy checking in. Life was moving forward, carrying us all toward whatever came next. But for now, I sat in my garden, wearing my son's gift, feeling the peace that comes from knowing you fought the good fight and won. Not the battle everyone saw. That was just noise and drama. The real victory was quieter. A son who understood, a family preserved, a future protected. I'd spent 40 years as a night shift nurse, fighting death in hospital corridors, but my greatest battle had been fought in a church on an October afternoon, armed with nothing but a mother's love and the courage to use it. And I had won. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought by the quietest warriors, and every mother has a little bit of that warrior inside her.